Hey, what's up everybody? This is D, MKD58 Media, back again with another movie review. This is a personal favorite of mine, longtime personal favorite, and to me, a very underrated sequel to a very iconic and popular sci-fi action horror film, okay? The movie we're talking about is Predator 2, starring Danny Glover, Gary Busey, Bill Paxton, and quite a few other folks that are in this. Morton Downey Jr. Is in this, so yeah, let's get into it. So just some quick backstory about the film. Predator 2 was released in 1990. As I said, starring Danny Glover as the main protagonist. It's the sequel to, obviously, the first original Predator. Came out in 1987, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, Carl Weathers, Jesse Ventura, lots of other people. I've did a review for that film on this channel, one of my favorite films of all time. So, Predator 2, however, I remember when I first kind of learned that Predator 2 existed, because for a long while I didn't know about it. Just somehow the movie had went under the radar, hadn't heard a lot of people talking about it, hadn't seen a lot of media coverage about it or whatever, hadn't seen a lot of reviews or anything about it. So I just somehow stumbled into the VHS box. Like, I saw the artwork for the VHS box, and I was shocked but pleasantly surprised that there was such a thing as a sequel to Predator, to the first Predator, because the first Predator had become such a favorite film of mine at the time, and still is, like I said. So, but Predator 2, I was kind of thrown off at first when I saw Danny Glover was in it, because that seemed like an odd mix. When you think of an action sci-fi, kind of blockbuster type creature feature, Danny Glover is definitely not the first person that would have came to mind. So that was a little awkward at first, but wasn't too bad of a thing. I don't have any issues with Danny Glover. I consider myself a relative fan of his work. So, and I was familiar with his Lethal Weapon work and The Color Purple and other stuff that he had did. So I was a fan of him, but thought he was kind of an awkward choice for a Predator film. But once I saw the film, I'm glad he's the guy that they picked to be in this. Now, Predator 2 is set in LA. It's basically, there's a heat wave going on and there's a crime wave going on. And so the city is just really under a lot of duress and stress. It's a very volatile atmosphere, I should say. Pretty much perfect for the Predator to come, or the Predators, I should say, to come and, kind of hunt, basically, and try to get involved in some of the conflict, all the warfare and gang warfare, and then the shootouts with the cops, all these different things that are going on. All of this conflict attracts these predators to this area so that they can kind of get in on the action, so to speak. And Danny Glover basically plays a hard-boiled, kind of almost stereotypical, but not completely stereotypical, but a very hard-boiled street detective. He's got an attitude, has a problem with authority, has unorthodox methods for achieving his goals, has a temper, all of those type of things. Constantly seems stressed out and like he wants to be someplace else, kind of. And he, seems like he possibly might have went through a divorce at some point in time or something. Just, what I'm saying, just that typical profile for a stressed out cop in an urban environment in Hollywood. So, yeah, and he does it well. So, with all the gang warfare going on, just different, factions, different gang factions shooting it out, and cops as well shooting it out with all these different multiple gang factions. And the Predator shows up and he starts basically taking guys out from all different sides. Like he's taking out cops, he's taking out gang members, all of that type of stuff, just because, these are the folks that are being violent. These are the folks that are exhibiting weapons and conflict and showcasing that they're possibly a threat of some sort. Just showcasing behavior that's going to kind of get the predators interested and riled up so that they can come kind of engage in their sportsman-like activities of hunting game. So basically bodies start piling up of gang members and start piling up in a way where it's like it's clear to the cops something else, or at least it's clear to Danny Glover, who also, by the way, his character is named Detective Harrigan. I can't think of his first name, but his last name is Harrigan. Danny Glover is playing him. And Detective Harrigan, at least, realizes it's not adding up how these, you know, what's going on with the killings of these different gang members and stuff. He feels like, you know, to quote him, there's a new player in town. And so basically, Detective Harrigan and his team, he has a little crew of cops, 3 or 4 other folks, and Bill Paxton is the newest recruit to that team. And him and his crew are trying to find out who this guy is, or, you know, this quote-unquote guy is that's killing all these gang members. And obviously, you know, they think it's just some, you know, unknown man or whatever. They don't know quite what they're on the trail of just yet. And that's basically the start off point of where we're at with this film. The main, which you kind of want to know going in. You don't need to know any of that when you first see it, because you know, the story tells itself, especially just through action and through, you know, narrative and all that type of stuff. But that's where, you know, the main stuff of how it all kicks off. So what I will just say I like to do a go into positives and then go into negatives and then conclude from there. But I don't really have any negatives for this film. I know other people probably do have a lot of negatives, because it's not like it's a 10 out of 10 film. I'm sure from a technical perspective and, you know, from an artistic, classical filmmaking perspective, it's probably got, you know, a lot of issues. But I've really got nothing but basically positive opinions about this movie. But I'll just talk about some of the things I like about this film. Off top, I gotta say I'm glad Kevin Peter Hall returned to play the main antagonist, to play the Predator. I've said it before in the last Predator review. He's the best actor or performer or whatever at portraying the Predator, and I've said that before. I've said I think it has a lot to do with just his unique attributes. He's 7'2" ballerina. Like that's an interesting mix to me, and I think it works well in terms of having athletic gracefulness and also having a level of weight to your movements and everything, having a certain size and all of that type of stuff. So he returns, and that's a big positive. The Predator, the creature in general, just continues to be a big positive in this franchise, particularly in the first 2 films in this franchise. I've spoke about a little bit about it. Danny Glover is a big positive to me. He's a very much different than Arnold Schwarzenegger's character in the first Predator, whereas Arnold Schwarzenegger's character is basically a, you know, top level elite soldier, basically, you know. Almost super soldier in a way, just super kind of 80s stereotype macho soldier guy. You know, Danny Glover is a street detective in an urban environment. It has a completely different vibe to him. Seemed a little bit more stressed out, or prone to being stressed out than Dutch did in Predator. Like Danny Glover is a little more kind of worn down, kind of beat down, you know, just a different look than Arnold Schwarzenegger in the first Predator. But I think it works. The change of scenery and change of environment, to me, kind of almost mandates that you have somewhat a change in the type of protagonist that's going to be handling things in the film. So, along with Danny Glover, all the actors and actresses in this film do a good job and perform their roles well. Bill Paxton in this film, he eventually grew on me. When I very first saw Predator 2, I thought his character was kind of goofy. And this is, you got to remember, I saw all the Predator films prior to ever seeing any of the Alien movies. So I wasn't aware of his character in Aliens and all that type of stuff. So his character in Predator 2 really came off just cartoony and kind of like, you know, zany almost or whatever, just like he was out of a different era or something. But eventually, you know, the movie gets going, and that just kind of you just kind of accepted it for what it was. And you know, his character, the vibe of his character stopped kind of being weird to me. It just kind of got used to it. Basically, you know, it grew on me pretty much. So, with that being said, all the actors, I enjoyed their performances. Gary Busey does a good job chewing scenery when he's on the screen. I feel like in the late 80s, early 90s, I feel like Gary Busey was at the height of his powers during that time period, at least for me. I mean, you're talking about Point Break, and then you're talking about Predator 2. Some of my, excuse me, that's my phone. Some of my favorite films, though I don't know what his work was like, you know, late 80s, early 90s, or since. I know the last couple years might have been kind of rough for him. I'm not too sure. I haven't been too up to date. But for me, just in my nostalgic mind, the late 80s, early 90s was a positive time to see Gary Busey on the movie screen. So, and he does a good job in this, playing, I think his character's name is Keys, playing a kind of secret government type who's trying to basically capture a predator and utilize the science and the technology and just the benefits that could possibly come from capturing a predator. It's also just to speak on just some things that I generally like, you know, just random things in a way. King Willie, played by Calvin Lockhart, I believe is his name. Even as a child, going back to when I was a kid, he was always just a standout character for me. Just because of he was kind of over the top and a little bit stereotypical, but also a little bit spooky with the voodoo and the kind of the cadence to his speech and the garb and everything. Just the atmosphere of the movie, the mood of the movie, and then the danger that you know is lurking out there in the night and the day for that matter in this film. So but I remember as a kid, he was always a standout character to me just because he was kind of, at the time, kind of spooky and eerie. And I liked how he talked, and just the scene when he talked to Harrigan in the alleyway, telling him about, you know, basically telling him that a demon is coming or whatever, talking about the predator. And then Harrigan leaves, and immediately after Harrigan leaves the meeting, Predator shows up in the alleyway, and then King Willie and the Predator kind of have a little showdown. They just, you know, they stand a standoff, but you never see the battle because they cut from the standoff, cut from that to the next shot is Predator walking off with King Willie's severed head in his hand, and the head is still screaming. Now I don't know if in the movie that was meant to be like I don't know, like a poetic, metaphorical type, you know, the scream wasn't literally coming from that severed head. That was just kind of the scream he let out during the battle, or if and that was just kind of a stylized type thing to have that scream voiceover going on while the head is getting while the Predator's walking off with the head, or if it was supposed to be a literal, like he was still screaming as his, you know, even though his head was severed from the, you know, to me I took it as almost more of a kind of stylistic type thing, and that to me that made it actually really kind of cool. I know some people might look at that scene kind of comedically, and I could see that and kind of understand that, but for some reason, going back to my childhood, I still always liked that scene where he takes King Willie's dome piece. And then of course you have the showdown in the slaughterhouse, basically the meat packing plant or whatever, with Keys and all of his crew, and then the Predator, and then Danny Glover comes in to try to get some of the Predator or whatever. Just that whole sequence where they're trying to catch him and capture him, and he's you know, going through his, I call it his Instagram settings, when he's going through his different infrared vision, variant types of vision or whatever, and he finally finds one that works for him because it shows the light beams of Keys and his guys that are trying to find the Predator, and that allows him to locate them so he can start taking them out and picking them off or whatever. Just that whole sequence was cool. I like the whole subway attack sequence when the Predator jumps on the subway train and gets in there, starts killing people, and it eventually leads to Bill Paxton's death. I will put spoiler in the description for this film. I don't know if anybody actually cares about that for this film. It's pretty old, and I feel like Predator fans are the ones that are mainly going to watch this video. And if you're a Predator fan, I'm pretty sure you've already seen Predator 2, I would hope, because it's the second best film in the franchise as far as I'm concerned. So I'm not going to worry too much about spoilers. But yeah, so that whole subway train sequence, and then the kind of foot race or the foot chase it kind of leads to with Danny Glover going after the Predator. Just all of that was entertaining. I enjoyed that. Now I'm going to get ready to wrap this up. I'm going to give my final score for this in a really shortly. But the last final, and there's more stuff that I liked about this film, but just to shorten up the review, the final thing that I'll talk about as far as a big positive and a big thing that I enjoyed about this film was I enjoyed the kind of expansion on the lore of the Predator, how it kind of expanded the world and added to the lore of the Predator. So basically, leading into that, I like that in the ending of the film, when you saw he kills that Predator, 10 or so other Predators come out the ship, take their fallen brother into the ship, and then one of the Predators throws Danny Glover a pistol from the 1700s, basically as a trophy for being able to take out one of their guys. And that just shows that souvenir kind of shows for how long that they've been doing this, how long they've been kind of going around the galaxies, going around to different worlds and planets to hunt game and to do battle and things like that. So that was kind of an exciting thing to see back then, because it made you think about possibilities for future things that could happen in the movies and stuff like that. So, but to me that was a really strong ending for a sequel. So with that being said, okay, that's it as far as talking about specific things in the film that I liked. Let's get into kind of the final review and just general opinion of this film. I feel this is a really underrated sequel. I think as time goes by, it gets more praise. Very much similar to kind of Batman Returns. I know I always draw everything back to Batman Returns. It's like you can tell when I kind of started really getting into the styles of films and stuff, because I always harken back to Batman Returns for some reason. But very similar to Batman Returns, I feel like as time goes by, it starts to become more popular as a sequel to a very popular original film. Predator, I think more people will, especially now that The Predator or whatever that came out just recently, which turned out to be pretty trash, especially as bad Predator movies come out, newer Predator movies come out, I think Predator 2, as people see it, it'll start to be more, and as people go back to it, it'll start to be appreciated a lot more. I think it's a strong film, and it takes everything from the first one and just kind of moves it to a different location. The things that you like about the first one, it kind of keeps that. And within reason. Everybody loved the relationship that the soldiers had in the first Predator, but if you're going to change the location, it's kind of hard to recreate that. I think they did kind of try to have some camaraderie with between the cops, Harrigan and Bill Paxton, and then Danny, and then I can't think of the lady's name, but that whole crew of cops, I think they tried to have some sort of level of camaraderie and personality between them, and interplay and interchanging jokes and things like that. And so I could see what they tried to kind of do, but you can't replicate the chemistry that the soldiers had in the first Predator. But I think as far as transitioning to a different environment, they did really well for themselves as far as doing that. I think Danny Glover did a really great job playing his type of character. I think everybody, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think most people prefer the first Predator, and most people prefer Arnold's performance in Arnold's character. But I think Danny Glover gave a really strong, underrated performance as Harrigan. I think there's a lot of stuff about his performance that's funny to me. I think he's always looking tired and stressed out, and still he's got that "I'm too old for this shit" kind of vibe to him still, like that carryover from Lethal Weapon. But I thought that was kind of funny. I thought that worked for him, because the city is hot as hell. There's crime all over constantly. it would make sense for him to be tired and kind of stressed out and almost broken down in a way. So yeah, I think they did a great job with just moving it to a different setting, but still keeping a lot of the same vibe. Lots of hints of the same musical score helped keep the same kind of heart of the first film, so it still felt like a part of the same universe, a part of the same world. It's a really easy transition. If you watch the first two back to back, like, it's a really almost fluid transition, especially with the opening of Predator 2. The opening starts out showing like a wooded, almost jungly type looking area, and then the camera pans up to show the LA cityscape is just over the trees that you were actually just looking at, you know, kind of a wooded area of California. But that type of transition shot, if you watch Predator 1 and then immediately start watching Predator 2, that type of shot makes the transition from the first movie, that type of shot mixed with everything else they do stylistically that carries over from the first movie, it makes that transition very smooth and very fluid. I think the first two Predator films go together really well. Just in my opinion, I enjoy them both. The first one is obviously better, but Predator 2 is really good in my opinion. For a score, I'm going to go ahead and give Predator 2 a 7.5 out of 10. Not really, I wouldn't say it's not really a flawless film. There are a few, I will say there's a few moments when kind of the editing on some of the action, on some of the like violent scenes or whatever is kind of shoddy, kind of dodgy, not as like fluid as it should be. I mean, maybe I should say camera work as opposed to editing. But it's very minor and it's not enough to really even be truly an issue. But it's the only thing just that crosses my mind as any type of negative or, you know, noticeable standout negative with this film for me. Yeah, so I like it. Predator 2, check it out if you're a fan of the Predator franchise or just curious about it. You know, the same way I just recently, within the last year or so, got into the Alien franchise. But I've been into the Predator franchise for a long time. Maybe there's somebody out there who only just recently has started to become curious about the Predator franchise. And if so, maybe this video can provide a little bit of insight to you as far as should you or should you not check out Predator 2. And I personally think that you should. So there it is, 7.5 out of 10, Predator 2, 1990, starring Danny Glover and Gary Busey and Bill Paxton. Check it out. All right, you guys, thanks for watching this review. I'll catch you on the next go round.